Hey, everybody, it's Steve Van Tassel here for Dynasty Owner. And we're here giving our Week 7 preview. And I know everybody's talking about the big thing. The big thing in fantasy football this week is bye weeks and how many teams are on bye. There's 6 and everything like that. But I thought I'd mix it up a little bit and talk about something different, and that's full lineups. So a full lineup is something hard to do this week with 6 teams on bye. Which I think I find a little bit odd because, it's a little harder in Dynasty Owner than in regular fantasy football. I mean, regular fantasy football, there's still 26 teams playing. A lot of these Dynasty leagues people are in, like you start 8 or 10 players and you have 30-man rosters. I don't see what the problem is to have a guy or two on your bench who you can put into your starting lineup. I mean, it might not be the best starting lineup you can put out, but you should be able to put together a starting lineup. In redraft, it's even less of an issue, I think. I mean, you should just be able to have enough guys to play. I mean, and do your best. In Dynasty Owner, it's a little different because we have to start 15 players. You got 8 players in your starting lineup, and then you got 7 players on your bench. Now, a lot of people will forego a bench spot to keep some other players around, but I just don't. I think that you try to do your best and get a full lineup in there, even if it might hurt your team in the long run. In the short run, you're trying to win, trying to be fair to everybody else in your league. And I just think it's something that you need to do. So without further ado, we're going to talk about, people who have their full lineups there. And we're going to talk about the teams that have people that have a full lineup. So with that said, we're gonna get rid of all these. We're gonna get rid of these graphics here, and we're gonna talk about full lineups. Our Week 7 preview is about full lineups. So if you do have a full lineup, here you go. Here's a round of applause for you. Thank you, Snoop Dogg. You did a good job. It's hard to do. I mean, I know some people had to do stuff like pick up Case Keenum to play quarterback on Thursday night, or Chris Blewett, the new kicker for the Washington football team, or some other kicker to have a bench kicker on these bye weeks. But if you did do that, Snoop Dogg and I are giving you a round of applause. So here we go. So the first thing we're going to do is the usual. These guys should be in your starting lineup this week, which is more difficult in some ways because of the fewer teams playing, the more teams on bye. But some ways it's easier because there's people to play with, and less points should be starting lineup worthy this week. So to recap Week 6, I had these 4 players: Taylor Heinicke, Brandon Bolden, Tim Patrick, and Ricky Seals-Jones that you should have had in your Dynasty Owner starting lineup. And the results were average. I had a good recommendation with Ricky Seals-Jones, who was the tight end 6 for the week in Dynasty Owner. Tim Patrick was just okay. 13.2 points isn't bad, but he was kind of a low-end flex, very low-end flex. And then the Heinicke and Brandon Bolden choices were just bad. Heinicke, he did throw to Ricky Seals-Jones and a touchdown pass to him, but just didn't have enough points, only 12.1. And Bolden was a complete flop, and that's 6 complete flops for me for these recommendations for starting running backs. So we'll see if I can do better this week. So with that, we've got our Week 7 starting lineup recommendations. And first, we're going to start off with Matt Ryan from the Atlanta Falcons. And they're playing the Dolphins. The Dolphins are coming back from London, and the Dolphins defense isn't great. I mean, opposing quarterbacks are averaging 26 Dynasty Owner fantasy points per game against them. And Ryan's been playing better the last 2 weeks before their bye. And he had 39.8 points in Week 4 and 30 points in Week 5. So he's playing better. He's still way outside the top 12 quarterbacks, even with bye weeks this week. But I think if you're one of the few people who've got Matt Ryan in your lineup and you need to play him, this is a good chance to put him in your lineup. I wouldn't worry about it. Second is Devonta Freeman. And I'm recording this on Saturday with the news that Latavius Murray is out for the week. When I wrote this, I was optimistic that even with if Murray was in, that Freeman was probably going to be the lead back for the Baltimore Ravens. He led the team in receptions 2 weeks ago, and he led the running backs in receptions and receiving yards. And he led the running backs in rushing yards last week. And I think that's going to be enough to make him a starting running back this week when they're playing Cincinnati. So I think Devonta Freeman, if you have him, is worth a spot in your lineup. And he's pretty cheap in Dynasty Owner. He's only a little over $1 million. Speaking of cheap, the third player on our list is Marquez Callaway from the New Orleans Saints. His salary is 2 years, but it's only $765,000. So he's owned, I think, in 100% of leagues, and he should be. The first 4 weeks he didn't play very well. He averaged only about 7 points per week, and everybody was very disappointed because they were expecting him to step up and be the number one receiver in Michael Thomas's absence. And then in week 5, right before their bye, he went out and scored 24.5 dynasty owner fantasy points and had 2 touchdowns. The expectation was that Thomas would be back this week, but he's not. So I think it's a good week to get Callaway in your lineup. It's kind of might be his last chance to be the number one receiver. And they're playing the Seattle defense, which hasn't been great against pass catchers. They're ranked 21st in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. And last week, Deontay Johnson against him had 18.6 dynasty owner fantasy points. So I think Callaway is a good guy to have in your starting lineup this week if you have him on your roster. And last is somebody who was good last year, Robert Tonyan, but hasn't been good at all this year. I mean, last year he had 11 touchdowns. He averaged 11 points per game. And this year, completely different. He's got 1 touchdown through 6 weeks, and he's averaging 4.4 dynasty owner fantasy points per week. But I think this might be his week. They're playing the Washington football team, who hasn't been great against tight ends. They've let good tight ends like Travis Kelce, Dawson Knox, and Kyle Pitts score a lot of points, but they've also let some of the weaker tight ends that they've played against, like Adam Troutman and Kyle Rudolph, to have their best scoring games of the year. Admittedly, those aren't great points. Troutman was 6.3 and Rudolph was 4.5, but Tonyan's a step up from those guys, and we saw what he could do last year, so I think he just needs an opportunity this week. And there were some other – Tonyan's just outside the top 12, even with some of the better tight ends on bye this week. I mean, you've got a lot of guys on bye. Dawson Knox is on bye, but he's hurt. Dalton Schultz is on bye. Jared Cook, who's even the top 12 wide receivers, also on bye. Rob Gronkowski's still out. So you might have to dig a little deeper if you've got one of those guys, and Tonyan's a good guy if you have him on your roster to get in your starting lineup. Next, we're going to talk about guys who should be on your bench. And it's the same deal this week. Fewer teams mean more guys step up and have to be in the starting lineup. But these are some guys who probably should be in your starting lineup, but I just don't think they're going to have a good week and really should be on your bench or practice squad. So let's first go over through the week 6 bench recap. And I had suggested having Derek Carr, Dalvin Cook, Tyler Lockett, and Dawson Knox on your bench. Some pretty big names there last week. And it was pretty average. It was 2 bad and 2 good recommendations. Derek Carr and Dalvin Cook were very good. Both Dalvin Cook was a top 10 running back, and Derek Carr was quarterback 8 for the week. So both of them should have been in your starting lineup. I hope you didn't bench them based on my recommendation. But the other 2 guys, Tyler Lockett and Dawson Knox, those were good recommendations. As predicted, Tyler Lockett struggled against Pittsburgh with Geno Smith as the quarterback and only had 5.3 dynasty on fantasy points. And Dawson Knox, he broke his hand. He was still able to throw a 2-point conversion to Josh Allen, but overall he only had 7.5 dynasty on fantasy points. So he was going to be a very low bench tight end this week. So that was a good recommendation. Hopefully you stored him away on your bench. With that said, we're going to go into the week 7 bench recommendations. And first is Sam Darnold from the Carolina Panthers. And I know a lot of people might be saying, he's not a top 12 quarterback. Well, actually, he is this week. He's the 10th ranked quarterback playing in Dynasty Owner this week because a lot of the top 12 quarterbacks are on bye. Josh Allen, Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert, and Kirk Cousins, all on bye. So you've got any of those guys as your starting quarterback, you might need a replacement. And I think Darnold could be a good one. Isn't going to be a good one this week, even though he's in the top 10. I mean, his last 2 games have been very poor. He had 6.8 dynasty under fantasy points in week 5, and he had 20.1 points last week, but he needed a late touchdown and 2-point conversion to even get to that point, to get 20.1 dynasty under fantasy points. So up until then, he didn't have very many. So I realized that he might be your best option, but he's going back to New York. I know he's playing the Giants, who are 1-5, but he doesn't have good memories of New York. I'm not sure this is the best week for him. So I would say that you should put Sam Darnold on your bench. I know I probably say that a lot, honestly. I'm not a big Darnold fan, but I think this week it's a good recommendation to keep him on your bench if you've got somebody better. The next guy is Daryl Henderson from the Rams. And honestly, this is somewhat of a hunch. It's hard to recommend these running backs, good running backs, to just suddenly bench one week because they all, I haven't done a good job. I've done an okay job of it, but it's just very difficult. And the reason for Henderson this week is that they're playing the Lions. I really think Sean McVay is going to let Matthew Stafford go wild and pass a lot, more than he's probably been passing this season. He's only averaging, Matthew Stafford's only averaging 33 passes per game. Last year, the Rams offense averaged more like 37, which is funny because they upgraded in quarterback from Jared Goff to Matthew Stafford, but they're passing less. So I think this week, that might be a week where they pass a little bit more, which means less work for Henderson. And I also think that they'll probably be ahead by a lot by the end of the game. And that might mean Henderson gives way to Sony Michel. I mean, Sean McVay doesn't care about your fantasy team that you need the points from Daryl Henderson. He just cares about keeping Henderson healthy for the second half of the season. So I think Henderson, it's a hunch, but I think he's going to have a tough time putting up fantasy points this week. So you should probably have him on your bench. The third guy, and we're not going to belabor this point. If you look at the article, it's a very short write-up. The Patriots held Davis to 2.8 dynasty owner fantasy points back in week 2. Why can't they do it again? I know Zach Wilson's played 3 more games, has a little more experience, but Jamison Crowder's back, and I think the Patriots are going to lock down Corey Davis and do it again. They did it 4 weeks ago. They did it back in week 2. I don't see any reason why they can't do it again. So I think Davis should be on your bench. And the last guy is Mike Gaseki. And it's funny because when I was picking guys, I was worried about the Dolphins players because they're playing after a bye week after being in London. And usually teams after they go to London get a bye week. But the Dolphins don't this week, which is kind of not normal. The Falcons and Jets, who played in London in week 5, had week 6 off. And Jacksonville, who was Miami's opponent last week, has the week off. But the Dolphins, for some reason, are playing. So I'm worried that may reduce their offense. And the other reason is, Gaseki had a great game over in London. He had 19.5 dynasty on fantasy points with Tua back at his quarterback. So everybody's like, well, Tua's back. He's going to throw a lot to Gaseki. Well, in week 1, Gaseki had 0. He had a Blutarski, 0.0 dynasty on fantasy points. And last week, Myles Gaskin had only 2.4 dynasty on fantasy points. The week before, Gaskin had 31.9 points. So, I mean, the Dolphins don't seem to have a great track record of letting players who have a good week one week continue to have good weeks the next week. So for that reason, I think it's going to happen again. So I would have Gaseki on my bench. And finally, we've got our Dynasty Owner matchup of the week. And this is a good one. I'm very happy. I was chatting on Twitter with the owner of TPC Murder Hornets, who mentioned that he was 6-0. And then I looked at his game this week, and I saw that he was playing a foreign team in Wheelwoody. I was like, that might be a good matchup. But then I looked at both teams, and I saw that this is League 27466, and I saw that the last year, these teams faced off in the third place game with the Murder Hornets winning. So hopefully Wheelwoody might have a little bit of revenge. There aren't a lot of undefeated teams left in Dynasty Owners, so the Murder Hornets are one of them. And then I looked at the Chase for the Ring standings, and I saw that the TPC Murder Hornets are in 112th place in the Chase for the Ring. But close behind them, even though they're 2 games behind them in the standings, Wheelwoody is in 148th place in the Chase standings. This was before Thursday night. You can see I pulled this after the game. Murder Hornets didn't have a great start to the game. They were projected to win by about 20 Dynasty Owner fantasy points. That advantage is down to 7. But I still think this game's going to be a good game. Wheelwoody has a chance to pull off the upset. The main reason why the Murder Hornets are favored at all is the fact that their starting running backs are Alvin Kamara and Daryl Henderson. And Wheelwoody has a bye week problem. Usually they roll out Dalvin Cook and James Robinson. But they can't this week because both of those guys are on bye. So they're running with the starting running back combo of Mike Ingram and Michael Carter, which is going to depress their production significantly. But the good news is that even though it says 12 to play, the Murder Hornets already had 3 players play. Will Wardy's got 15. Both of these guys have got full starting lineups. So, which both of them deserve a round of applause for that, for just having a full lineup. And they should, honestly, because both of these teams are in the thick of the playoff hunt in their league, and also kind of in the thick of the chase for the ring standings. I mean, I know being 112th might not seem great, or being 148th might not seem great, but things are going to change with bye weeks. Some teams that have great teams are going to have great players off 1 week soon, and these teams might be able, if they keep fielding full lineups every week, might creep up and move up. Now, both of them aren't going to be in the top 25 at the end of the season. Since they're in the same league, only one team per league is in the chase for the ring. You have to win your league to be in the final top 25. But I wouldn't be surprised if either one of these teams, if they win their league, is in the top 25 at the end of the year. So that's it. We talked about full line. We talked a lot about full lineups. Hopefully you have a full lineup this week for your dynasty owner team. Hopefully you win, unless you're playing me. I don't want you to win if you're playing me. I've got all full lineups this week. I made it so. It was a little difficult, but I'm making it so I'm very happy about that. And hopefully, if you've employed this full lineup strategy, it works for you, because I think you should be rewarded for that. Hopefully, you don't have a close game, but if you do and you win because of those bench points because you added somebody to your bench and they scored a couple of points, that could be the difference between winning and losing. And in the end, at the end of the year, that might be the difference between getting into the top 25 of the chase and not getting into the top 25 of the chase for the ring. Who knows? Maybe one of the team who wins at the end of the year might credit the fact that they had a full lineup in this bye week or these bye weeks as the reason why they were able to score points. I mean, those little points at the end might be the difference between first place and second place. It might be the difference between being Victor and winning the ring and being the second place guy, who I can't remember right now because he was not Victor, and not winning the ring. So thanks for watching the video. Please read the article that's associated with it. It's on the Dynasty Owner website. And tune in on Monday. We've got an article coming out from Jay Pounds previewing Monday Night Football. Then Tuesday, Jay will be back. He'll have his free agent auction targets for Week 8, which is over the halfway point of the season. After this week, we're halfway done with the Dynasty Owner season. We're 14-week regular season, and this is Week 7. So we're halfway through. Also on Tuesday, I'll be back with the recap article, recapping Week 7, naming the player of the week, the value player of the week, and telling you who you should have had in your lineup and who you shouldn't have. On Wednesday, Matt the Jerk, Dynasty Jerk, is back. He chooses his topics for his Wednesday article. He just finished a series on incredibly true statistics, and I'm anxious to see what he's got this week. So check out that video and read that article on Wednesday. And then Matt will be back on Thursday. He's going to preview Week 8 Thursday Night Football, which starts the second half of the Dynasty Owner season. Please follow all of us on Twitter. Follow Dynasty_Owner on Twitter. Like this video. Like all the videos. Watch all the videos. Hopefully, we'll be back on Wednesday with a live stream with me, Tim, and Cousin Justin. And hopefully, Tim and Seth will be here on Thursday doing a live stream at 1 o'clock talking about Week 8 in Dynasty Owner. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Go check out the article. Don't forget to set your lineup. Set a full lineup if you can. And have a great week. Talk to you later. Bye.